Welcome to this session about how open badges are improving the education to work ecosystem. We're going to have 3 short sessions that will run concurrently. So we have a case study, we'll have an interview with one of our members, and then we'll have a short talk that looks at both the history and the future of open badges. And to get us started, it's a great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Yaz el Hakim, who has a long history of enhancing the learning experience, originally as an academic and now as the CEO of Verify Ed. Over to you.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, I was muted. Apologies. So the thing that I was going to share was a little bit about what we've learned in the last 3 years, having developed micro-credentials for universities and for governments around the world. We currently issue low-cost blockchain-backed digital certificates and credentials against open badge standards for interoperability, creating a skill record, which I want to talk much more about, which verify the skills and the qualifications instantly. We did this because I was in education at the University of Winchester for about 12, 13 years, in which case I started as an hourly paid lecturer, but all the way through to Director of Learning and Teaching and Student Engagement, Board of Governors, etc., and consulted around the world and saw that graduating students from university had a pain point. The pain point was that A, we were cutting our ties with the students, and B, the students were also going out into employment where they had to verify what they had actually achieved. So we set up Verify Ed 3 years ago with the belief that blockchain could remove any sort of fraud from the system. We were wrong, actually. That was not the main point, although there is a friction and a pain point here where it costs £12 to verify a UK degree. There are other verification costs in other countries that are associated with confirming someone has actually studied a degree in a certain place. In the UK, it's through JISC and HEAD, where we actually incurred a £15 cost to check our member of staff. But we were wrong. That's actually not the value here to blockchain credentials and credentials overall. What we actually found is that students don't really have a really great digital location to store all of their learning. They can't verify that with employers in a way that makes sense for them to curate the space that they own. And we did a few projects that we wanted to take you through our journey to date and what we've learned at each step. So with the World Bank, we actually learned that there are voracious learners all around the world, and employment and employers are not even aware of the potential and the capability in other countries where those institutions aren't recognized, aren't part of the filtering list that employers are looking for to recruit from. And there's a macro shift, I think, happening now around a skills-based economy that means anyone who can demonstrate the skills wherever they are in the world will be more employable than they were previously. There are other questions around infrastructure, but our key achievement there was that we were able, in partnership with FutureLearn and IBM and the World Bank, to aggregate micro-credentials in a way that they said, here are our standards. We agree that these micro-credentials are similar, and we're happy to aggregate them in the same location. So we're able to demonstrate IBM and FutureLearn credentials beside each other, which we were ecstatic about. And from that project, 3 students that came out of KNUST University and Moi University in Ghana and Kenya, respectively, were then employed by in companies in Germany and in Ghana. But we knew that there was actually a much more integral play with the universities themselves, from my experience at Winchester, which was actually that the employers want to be able to find skilled graduates. They want to be able to distinguish between students and find the student that got straight 90s for user-centered design throughout their course. They can't differentiate between a graduating cohort of 400 students who did computer science with this pathway. What they need to know is who's actually got these JavaScript coding expertise and passion. And the thing that we've been working on with Middlesex, which I really wanted to spend most of today's session talking about, was it's our first full UK institution that we're working with to both micro-credential their modules, extracurricular credit, volunteering, additional learning outside, and even looking at part-time work. And that's across Middlesex and into their transnational education as well. is this idea that by micro-credentialing the learning experience, university experiences are much richer than the single transcript at the end with a list of modules. B, the ability for us to actually map skills within those learning experiences is an activity that as a university they have to do, that lots of universities have learning outcomes, have further higher education qualification equivalents, and they need to translate those into language that employers are able to better understand and better search by. And for students, one of the key things that we realized through this project was that it was their ability to articulate the skills that they've gained. It was their ability to understand, I developed these skills within these activities, and these are the examples and the points of my learning that I can actually reference when they're in an interview. And we've had lots of conversations with MDX Works, it's the employability arm at Middlesex, and other employability arms in other UK universities. We've just had agreement from Russell Group University today, in a similar vein, to try and state, how do we better allow our students to see the skills that they're developing as they go through and recognize extracurricular and curricular in one location? The issue that I pose and that I'm still working with the institutions on is, how do you create skills frameworks that allow any skill to be transferable and understood with a level of mastery? And I think that's the journey that we're on with the higher education sector as we grow. And it does look like some of the presentations earlier around national level thinking is necessary for us to be able to understand where those skills frameworks are actually, or taxonomies are actually going to align in a way that people can buy into them in a more wholesale way. The issue is that across multiple subjects at the University of Middlesex, some have professional standing and have professional recognition and have a specific taxonomy that they want to focus on, whereas others want to focus on a very different skill set. And the university as a centre is thinking, how do we get our graduate attributes or competencies to be aligned in a way that's consistent but allows distinction to be addressed? So there are a number of questions that I've set things running internally and externally there. But what we understand and believe vehemently is that the skills need to be mapped, they need to be understood, and at level of mastery in terms of how it's being demonstrated, what that means, there are going to be really interesting conversations that evolve as we go nationally. And was really interested in Petrina's presentation just a moment ago as well, around the different institutions that are looking in this area. And it'd be great to understand more people in this community who are interested in the skills that fit into these credentials, because I think although we have a series of credentials that are useful, the interoperability of them we can do in a standards-based way, obviously with open badges and other, and it's definitely moving this way where students want that all in one location, but the ability for that to then address some of these macro problems, where a skills gap is at the macro level. We're talking about the MQA earlier as our first national opportunity that we're contracted with, and the idea that across a nation there are certain skills that want to be developed, certain industries that want to be attracted. We're certainly seeing now an interesting approach from not only institutions within the country, but the macro view of the country, thinking about which industries they want to be attractive for, which employers they want to attract into the country for the specific employment that's being desired. We also know that recruitment's been terribly slow, and actually there's so many applications to each job, refining it down and finding the right candidate quickly is particularly difficult. And we think there'll be triangulated data, which we're not going to go into too much in this presentation, but the triangulated data that we're looking at, I think, offers a different slice, rather than just trusting credentials and the data within them, but looking at other points of verification around individuals so that recruitment can be expedited far quicker. We know that there's a growing skills gap, everyone talks about that, and we know that the ecosystem is evolving, but the ecosystem will have to be interoperable. in the standards, I think we're actually making good progress, and lots of people agree in how those standards can be formatted so that they're interoperable. Whether everyone's allowing import and export of those credentials freely at this point is something that I think we're still running into and understanding a bit more about. But the idea that this will be an ecosystem, this will be a space where people will interoperate with different providers, but the learner needs to love the experience. And for that experience to be amazing, the end user's experience needs to be prioritized. So page of data is no longer what an end user wants. And actually the ability to create a user experience that creates a skills profile, that allows the credentials to stand and engage on their own 2 feet, that allows the data within it to be able to verify instantly, is an essential part of the user experience. And that's, from my experience as Director of Student Engagement at Winchester, if the student didn't like it or the staff member didn't like it and we are rolling out an innovation, it didn't get used. And so if your platform's not getting used and it's just issuing the data, then there's the issue. And one of the key things is that the user-centered experience that students now expect is very dissimilar to how it started a few hundred years ago and beyond. I'm going to stop there, but just the excitement around this space and around what we can achieve together as a community across the ecosystem to see this better interoperability and the better use of skills taxonomies in a standardized and more accelerating way would be phenomenal. And we wish to be at the heart of that with people working on this. I know there are major players in the States, etc., that we've been speaking with who are making fairly significant gains in this area, but I think there's still more work to be done, and keen to get our sleeves rolled up and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaz, and great to see that willingness. Rob emphasised yesterday the importance of people stepping up, showing leadership in the community, and that's organisations of all sizes, however large or small. And I know that Verify Ed is making an amazing contribution to the work. Do we have any questions for Yaz? You've certainly thrown a challenge to us that we need to prioritise the end user experience. And you threw a big question out as well that I've noticed. How can we create skills frameworks that allow any skill to be presented and understood? I'm repeating that question because I know we've got some of our final panelists on the call already, and I'm going to put that question to our panel later today to see what answers we get back from that, unless anyone would like to give an immediate reply. Okay.
Definitely a good plug to tune into the panel afterwards.
Okay, then we move into the second of our examples. Monica is working in Italy to meet the needs of their particular labour market. And we're going to do this section a little bit differently because she's already talked to 4 of her customers, and we have some great mini case studies that are actually available as an on-demand video from the attendee hub. So in the 10 minutes, I'm just going to have a chat with Monica to give us some of the background in the hope that you'll go and watch the case studies later. So Monica, just tell us who you are and where you're from first.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica Trippodo from Italy, in Bologna. I am responsible for business developer of our solution, and I work in an Italian quality company.
So tell us a little bit more about IQC and how the company became interested in using open badges.
Okay, well, IQC is located in Bologna. Bologna is a rich industrial area. For who doesn't know where Bologna is located, is in the middle between Milan and Florence. We provide digital solutions to track and represent organizational performance and skills through the employment of blockchain technology, and we provide our services in different regions of Italy, not just regionally. Focusing on how I could see come to be interested in using digital badge, well, you have to know that the president heard about badge use in the USA and found it interesting, but realized that the solution would need to be adapted to the Italian context. So the three members that founded IQC all previously worked in a certification body. So they understood the importance to set a specific standard for the representation of information kept inside badge in order to meet the needs of the Italian market that pay a lot of attention to the quality of the information.
So I'm hearing a theme that we heard in one of the earlier sessions today. You come across something that's been used in the US, but you want to adapt it for your particular needs and your market. So how did you approach designing the badges?
Well, from the start, IQC decided to be compliant with one attached standards and understood the importance of certifying against these standards. At the same time, IQC realized that there is a risk of companies applying a fashion design approach to badge, whereby the badge looks good and advertise the issuer brand, but they lack information that is truly useful to the badge owner or future user. I mean, badges have been created for this reason. So we wanted to give the possibility to our issuer to design badge that could contain valuable information for the user. Bear in mind that there may be different type of user, like badge owner, HR department, and prospective employer, and all of them need accurate and clear information about the skills acquired.
Right, so exactly as Yaz said, that the badges need to be user-friendly, but they need to be useful as well, and that means useful for different stakeholders.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, how did you put your philosophy into practice?
We created a stakeholder group named Digital Badge Stakeholder Table that help IQC to understand which characteristics badge need to have in order to be useful to the range of stakeholders user. Our digital badge stakeholder table include public and private sector bodies with a wide range of expertise. Assolavoro, the biggest association that includes employment agencies that understand employer needs across a range of different sectors. Then we have Ampia Service, that is a major training association for professional development for the automotive sector. We have School of Management of Turin University, which provide academic input and is able to make a bridge between education and work ecosystem. The Digital Badge Stakeholder Table has been operating since 2017, and we believe that has transformed the use of digital badge in Italy, providing different types of badges according to the scope. And on a technical level, all badges are issued via blockchain, and there is a possibility to transform them into an NFT, non-fungible token.
And you mentioned that your founders came from a background in a certification body, and you've mentioned the word standards a few times. Could you just say a little bit more about why standards are important in what you do?
Oh, well, standards are important in both technical and content terms. The use of one attached standards help ensure the portability of the badge for the owner's future career, while the use of a content standards helps in providing a richer and more meaningful understanding of the person's skills. We believe that mapping the skills according to a common language, but also framework, lets the recognition easily transferable across different job roles and industries. For instance, we adopt the European qualification framework that give you the possibility to highlight knowledge, abilities, and competencies that the person has acquired, and also the level of this knowledge. The partnership with the School of Management of University of Turin has helped us in align the soft skill badge to another important framework that is LifeComp issued by the European Commission. And this framework establishes a shared understanding of the personal, social, and learning to learn.
Right, so that's kind of a start to an answer of Yaz's question, because you're already connecting to competence frameworks at a European level. Could you just tell me, I know we have the video, so we're going to hear some user case studies, but could you just give me some highlights, maybe one or more success stories of implementations by your issuers?
Yes, for sure. Turin City Council is an issuer of our CBOX platform. Turin City Council issue digital badge to their all their employees, but also to candidates who participate in a mass recruitment drives. There are around 300 candidates that have been interviewed and tasted for a range of different jobs within the council. These assessments are scored against the same framework used by IQC, so they can be translated into digital badge. And all candidates have their competencies attested by digital badge. So even those who aren't successful in obtaining job within the council have a record of achievement to take away and use elsewhere. This benefits the whole local economy, as it saves other employers undertaking the same assessment. And this initiative won also a prize awarded by Polytechnic of Milan. And if you go, as you told, in IQC virtual exhibit booth, you can hear the story directly from City of Turin. And in general, anyway, I think that IQC has found an approach works for Italy, but can work equally well in the global market. For instance, we have other issuers that appreciate these typologies of badge, like ActionAid, Deloitte, or Randstad.
Definitely, I think examples that other people can relate to and that could be transferable. So many people do these mass recruitment drives, assessment centers, the idea that every candidate goes away with something useful even though they don't get the job, I think is a fantastic example. So what's next on the horizon for you then?
Well, the Italian Standard Authority, that is UNI, has been impressed by this approach. And together with the group that I mentioned before, the Digital Badge Stakeholder Table, we have published a best practice that has the aim to become a norm. And at the same time, another step that we will want to reach is integrate our platform with other framework like ISCO framework that describes the skills for each professional occupation, and also at national level we have something similar that is named Atlante Lavoro. So the next step will be for sure integrate also the language on which we communicate the skills.
Okay. Fantastic success story. Did you face any challenges?
For sure. IQC learner profile include a lot of people who have been in the workforce for a long time, and some of them are aged more than 50. Some of these people are lacking of digital skills and do not initially understand how digital badge operates and their values. So IQC is working with its badge issuer to encourage awareness arising across the workforce.
Yeah, so another important aspect of user friendliness and stakeholder awareness, as well as stakeholder engagement. Well, thank you very much for that. And I do encourage everyone to look at the video of the case studies. I can see that Yaz has put a question in the chat, but maybe you'd like to ask your question.
Okay, but
I just want to say, oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm reading your question. Well, To answer this question, maybe should be present my colleague at IT, but I can tell you that non-fungible token give the possibility to the person to bring his badge out from the platform. So his credential will alive despite if our platform still exists in the future. That I think that is the main reason that bring us to transform a badge also in a non-fungible token. And plus, because also the possibility to have certified all the evidence that you want to attach to this digital badge, not only the content, but also all the attached files. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
It's clear. Okay.
Thank you. If we don't have any further questions for Monica, then talking about survival into the future is a great lead into our third speaker in this session. Simone, always provocative, has given us an abstract that talks about how open badges are the original gangsters of the digital credential world. I think Simone is one of the original gangsters of the open badge world. And we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Hello, Jill. Hello, everyone. And hello to all the new gangsters of open badges. It's great to be back and share a couple of claims with you today, which I hope would resonate or provoke some further discussion and possibly direct some of the future progress of our community together. So hello, everyone. My name is Simone. By day, I'm in charge of the global ecosystem and innovation activities at Parchment, which last year acquired digitally a European company that I was working at. By night, I do some work in the standards community, namely, I co-chair the verifiable credentials for education task force in W3C, but I've always loved to contribute to building out the global credentialing ecosystem across education and work in different capacity in different standards bodies. So let's get rolling. My first claim would be that open badges are the ancestors of modern recognition technology. And the second claim today would be that open badges are the most fitting recognition technologies to support any micro-credential strategies. I'll try to explain why. But first, we want to make sure that we recognize this very clear statement, which effectively says that we are on a long journey together, and so some of us have been at it for longer. We have newcomers. I think it's would be failed to make assessment and judge or make decisions just based on the current era that we're living through in the internet. But there is sort of a recognition that this is going to be a long stretch, and what we can say today is bound to change tomorrow. Digitally, the company that I work with has really been around for a long time, and so I would certainly consider them as being an original gangster. In fact, they started back in 2005 when credentialing technology was not that sexy. It was actually very clunky. It was very difficult, particularly if you wanted to pitch it to universities. But sticking true to its values, they were really based on the sacred geometry of trust, which is a triangle. We eventually succeeded and turned out to be one of the global players in the ecosystem today. The basic principles that we have around how we look at learner records is that they have to be interoperable and comprehensive. To some extent, if you turn that into attitudes, you heard a lot about self-sovereignty. So these credentials have to provide agency to the learners that own them, and they need to be distributed in attitude. That also means that they need to be shareable. the very basic framing or mental model that I'd like to leave with you. These credentials need to be usable, used, and useful. I think there were some glimpses of that in the previous talks. When Parchment acquired Digital in 2021, they added an interesting nuance and a very basic principles, which is that credentials needs to be turned into opportunities. And that is really the main aim of Parchment and Digital combined, and to do this at global scale. So there have been verifiable credentials across the last 20 years. And I wanted to bring in an interesting tool to explain what's happening. And this is known as the Amara's law. In fact, it says that we tend to, as humans, to overestimate technology in the short term, but we underestimate it in the long term. So the curve looks like this. I think this is very much what happened to open badges. For whoever was around, you may recall that the early days of open badges were not all that fun. There was a lot of resistance, particularly from the higher education sector, in recognizing this technology as a suitable one, as one that was future-proof and that could do the job right. But I think my claim would be that because of their actual original design, they're now coming to that inflection point, and we're probably underestimating the power of digital credentials, particularly open badges, even today. So in full compliance with this notion of Amara's law. And this is why, I really mean to explain why, to me, open badges are the ancestor of modern recognition technologies. Patrina did share, a slide that put out that date as 2010 when badges were originally conceived. So that's quite a long time ago. And we've seen things evolving in the digital credential spectrum. And right now it's probably one of the hottest trends in the edtech space. So there is some magic inside badges, and that magic, as you all know, is the metadata that lives inside. I wanted to kind of point to why this is super powerful, and why badges, the design of badges, was very much future-proof and forward-looking, although we have not really experienced that. So there are 4 key fields to me that make this credentialing technology an inspiration for whatever is also happening right now in the Web3 world, or in this decentralized version of credentialing, which goes under the name of tokenization as well. So the evidence field is really where you build trust, right? It's evidence-based learning. It's how you can attest that you can act or perform on a specific skill. That was part of the original standard. Criteria add that transparency, which is so key if you want to have equity and inclusion, and also be able to compare these credentials one with the other. Alignment was a formidable way to bring in quality, connection to competence frameworks, qualification frameworks, and the endorsement, which is probably one of the less utilized fields in open badges, but it's the most promising one. I think endorsements bring about what is really possible, and connecting a reputation layer under the credentials. So again, another mental model to think about this is, layer 0 would be identity, layer 1 is the credentials, and layer 2 is reputation. That reputation layer, the endorsements, which can now be collected, we live in an abundance of data, which is noisy, but if we can take those and connect them to a skill, those endorsements become a signal of performance. And in a sense, those data points add liquidity to the currency that we think skills have. They make it more current. So very powerful. This all came together in 2010, people. So this is why badges are ancestors of modern recognition technology. If we have magic inside, there's culture outside. And this is very important as we think about the future of credentials or NFTs as well. So why are NFTs so popular, and why are digital credentials or verifiable credentials or badges not as popular? It's because they add expressiveness, and they trigger a cultural chord, which is very important for people. It's called skeuomorphism as well. I think that that is a cultural part of open badges that was frowned upon in the beginning, but now is the secret sauce for success. And badges came with a visual layer in the first place, right off the bat. Although that's been argued with, I think that is a very powerful tool that will bring about adoption. And I think we're seeing validation of that claim by whatever is happening in the NFT metaverse. Numbers. Badges have been issued in the millions, and we look forward for One Tech to share with us what's the next count. Katrina just shared, that the Open Learn has been issued 750,000 or 250,000. I'm sorry. So big numbers. There's adoption. This is a fact, and it's evidence that cannot be ignored. And the future. The future is really now. So Open Badges have also embarked on this journey to become compatible with another standard by W3C, verifiable credentials. And this is just another very important signal of how to coordinate in the ecosystem. And so two different standard bodies coming together to work on making these credentials usable, useful, and used. And so this is very important, particularly if we start to look at giving learner more agency, allowing for independent verification of these credentials. I think this is really another inflection point. And again, badges, I'll stick with badges, but they may become known as something else. But verifiable credentials and open badges are coming together in version 3 of the spec, which I think is going to be available for public in November. I want to call out to another OG of open badges, Carrie Lemoy, currently the Director of Technology at the MIT Digital Credential Consortium and my co-chair in W3C. She's put together a great article, so that's great. Really look forward to that. And the policies. So we live in an ecosystem that is ruled by policies, overarching frameworks that typically should provide the North Star, but also provide opportunities and make room for innovation to flourish. And one policy that I would call out, very important for us today, is, I guess, the European approach to micro-credentials, or any regional effort to compile or to provide guidance around the future of learning. Micro-credentials could be really thought of as the renaissance of learning, where we remove barriers between informal and formal, where we start to recognize co-curricular activities as part of a learning experience that is worthwhile being recognized and credentialed. So that particular policy framework is really comes in handy, and I would argue that badges are the most fit recognition technologies to support that in my second claim. And to kind of add a bit more of an academic take, or another tool that I think was helpful for me to understand, say, micro-credentialing in this political landscape, is this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I think it applies to how we think about micro-credentials. In essence, it says that when we are faced with something new, we all become black belts. We all think we get it, Think about micro-credentials. I think everyone now is, out there to issue their micro-credentials, talk about them. It's one of the most hyped up things in edtech. But, that is not really a strong signal for competence. As time goes by, at some point we realize in a more Socratic way, how little do we know about this technology? And so we just fall in sort of if you compare this to the Gartner hype cycle, it could be the draft of disillusionment. But we start to come to terms with the fact that we don't know enough, and so we need to go to work and put in the additional intention and attention to understand how these micro-credentials in this particular case could be reshaping the face of learning. And next to that, I wanted to offer sort of a streetwise definition of how I think about micro-credentials as it compares to digital credentials, because I think there's a lot of confusion in that. Again, this is not necessarily my take, but one take that I endorse, because it provides a good basic understanding to make sense of what's happening. And I'm actually borrowing this from a recent ACRO report, which says the badge is to the micro-credential what the diploma is to the degree. Sometimes we say, when we say micro-credentials, we are really talking about the whole thing. So instructional design, content, learning delivery, assessment, and credential. Digital credentials only are the certification, the thing that you get at the end of a learning experience. Micro-credentialing really encompasses a new way of thinking about learning, breaking it down in bite-sized chunks and so on. So I think this is good enough for the time being as it relates to micro-credentials. And here it is, this is my claim, why do I feel that badges are the most fitting recognition technologies to support any micro-credentialing strategies? Well, why is one, because they're accessible, they're very easy to use. You could go and issue an open badge for free online now in a matter of minutes, right? The other is that there is mainstream adoption. We've seen the numbers. I think there's no argument that could be made that badges are not the most widely used type of digital credentials in the market right now. They have proven to be very flexible across informal education and formal education. In fact, micro-credentials are the evidence of that. We're now using these technologies to certify or recognize learning that happens in less formal context, even for recognition of prior learning, by the way. Doug Belshaw just put out a great article, I think yesterday, on this particular use case for badges, which is very interesting. Thirdly, badges are future-proof. They are becoming verifiable credentials. They are on a journey. They were designed for the future in 2010, and they're now smart enough to understand that, to be resilient, even in the future, they need to partner and sort of stand on the shoulders of giants and sort of provide this great example of how you collaborate in building out an ecosystem. And they are supportive of open recognition principles. For the ones that are not familiar with open recognition, this is sort of a way to interpret or look at the use of credentialing in non-credentialing use cases. Let me put it this way: badges could be used as connectors of people rather than collectors of skills. So the open recognition use cases are way more social. They are used to build communities rather than to certify competencies. And so badges can do that, and I think that's beautiful. What is some of the evidence that we have, supporting this second claim that I made? Well, a few years ago already, the European Commission decided to use open badges in one of their flagship programs. It's called Selfie. This is actually a certification program for teachers that can, that are certified according to DigComp, which is a digital competence framework coming from the European Commission. So again, European Commission being the issuer of badges as early as 2017 for this particular project. More recently, universities in Europe, and certainly I know of a few in Italy, are issuing open badges to represent, full degrees. So very formal, very high stakes credentials. One platform that is a OneEdTech member is My Open Badge, that is doing this in Italy. A very interesting one to watch. Secondly, the European university consortia are coming together, and most of them are, focusing on micro-credentials. And I'm aware that a few are actually building their own credentialing platform, and they're using open badges to do that. Again, it's a ready technology that is fit for use, and it's production material. The other nuance thing that I wanted to signal, this has not come into full fruition as a policy, but there are conversations around thinking about a European degree, which is a joint degree on steroids. Imagine European universities that are consortia of 10 plus universities, issuing a joint degree that it would be known as a European degree. And kind of the benchmark in the early research there is certainly open badges. And lastly, I'd flag again how open badges have been explicitly and formally recognized as part of the Europass Digital Credential Initiative, which is what drives Europass. And this is kind of the end of my rush. A few years ago, there were, these memes shared around that we don't need no stinking badges when people were afraid of this, the threat of carpet badging or lukewarm badges. Well, I would argue that in fact, we need more badges right now, and we need to be cognizant and recognize that open badges have really been the original gangster of credentialing technologies. And that's me, Jill, back to you.
Thanks very much, Simone. I think you have given us a lot to think about, and where you ended a great lead into the next session. You've mentioned some of the big European initiatives. You've talked about a potential for a European renaissance, removing the barriers between formal and informal. A little bit over time, but I will take a pause in case we have any questions or observations. Nothing, just applause. Well, again, join me in applause for all of the three speakers. We have a very short break, and at 30 minutes past, we have the last panel discussion. So I'm sure you've all been given a lot to think about. Let's feed some of those comments, observations, further questions into our final panel. So please join us again shortly. Thanks, everyone.